I want to thank Alistair and Ed for supporting Code for America by having us here, but for a lot of other stuff that they do. And also to Scott Yara from Greenplum, who's been a supporter of ours from the beginning. Real quickly, we call ourselves a Peace Corps for geeks, but instead of sending our geeks off into the developing world, we send them into the wilds of municipal government. We have 28 fellows this year. They are incredibly passionate and talented developers and designers and data scientists and data wranglers. They're taking a year off from their jobs. We pair them in small teams of 3 or 4 people with local governments that are chosen through a competitive process. And they're based on, we have them work in this very structured year based on lean startup principles and design thinking and data-driven decision making. And they build apps. But of course, the apps are really all about data. So here's an example of one that's about data collection. In Philadelphia, they're using this app called Textizen, which they built to get feedback from citizens on the Philadelphia 2035 plan via text message. Here's one that's about data liberation. Our fellows liberated over 836 municipal data sets last year, which is pretty remarkable. It's actually remarkable that we counted that many. They put up open data portals like this one in Santa Cruz. Or data analysis. This is a project where the fellows looked through the search logs of honolulu.gov to figure out what people were really looking for when they came to the site, and then built a simple, beautiful, easy-to-use interface around those needs. And of course, you're probably not surprised, we do a lot of data visualization. So this one is visualizing service request data, so potholes, out street lights, and things like that. Now, these are just a couple of dozen that have been built throughout the year, but the point really is not so much the apps, is that these are really interesting problems to solve. And when you solve them, you make a big difference. You really can have an impact, not just on individuals, but on society at large. So let me explain that through one of the projects we're doing this year. This is Ann Milgram. She was formerly the Attorney General of New Jersey. And she has been teaching me a lot about our criminal justice system and what works and what doesn't work. So, for example, if you are charged with a crime, we as a society have a decision about whether we hold you before you're tried or release you. Now, there's a lot of data that could be brought to bear on that decision, but we don't use that data. They've studied this, and they've found out that the biggest factor in whether you're held or released is whether the judge had lunch that day. And of course, it matters a lot whether you're held, because it turns out that you're 5 times more likely to be convicted of a crime if you're held pre-trial versus if you're released. And I'm sure there are a lot of reasons why that's true, but again, they've studied this, and one of the things is that the jury simply sees you very differently. If you're coming from a jail cell, you look different, you smell different, frankly, you have had a different experience than if you're coming from home. And we think about this thing called bail. Bail is supposed to let the major criminals stay in jail and the petty criminals be released. Turns out if you're held on $500 bail, statistically, you are actually very unlikely to have that $500. And the bail bondsman won't help you. They want to deal with the $50,000 and $500,000 bails. So those guys get out, while the petty criminals are stuck in the system and held. And this is one of the reasons our criminal justice system is completely gummed up with very petty criminals or people who are charged with very minor crimes and are held for very long periods of time. And of course, if you're held, you lose your job, you can't support your family, and in jail, one of the things that happens is people often learn to become criminals. So this is work that matters a lot. Anne knows that we love working with municipal data, so she asked if we could get a couple of cities to implement the risk assessment model that her foundation has developed to try to help some cities make better decisions about pretrial. And I said to her, you know, to be honest, I'm a little scared of this. This seems like a pretty political thing, and I'm not sure it's something we should do. But I sent a note out to the network of cities that follow us and said, does anybody want to try this? And I was shocked. In about a day, I had about 20 cities raising their hands, saying, yes, we want to try. What I didn't know is that pre-trial incarceration is one of the biggest costs to cities, who, of course, are out of money. In some cases, it's the second biggest cost after pensions. So if you can move the needle on getting fewer people held pre-trial safely, even a couple of percentage points, you're not just saving lives, but you're saving an enormous amount of money for city government, which means you're saving taxpayer dollars. So this stuff really matters. we eventually chose 2 cities to work with, Louisville, Kentucky, and New York City. And now there are teams of 3 fellows each in those cities right now, learning everything they can about the criminal justice system. This is Marcin. Until January, he was a developer and designer at Google, but he's decided to do the Code for America year. And he's driving around Louisville with the police department on a ride-along. And he and his colleagues actually got booked into jail. They were held for about 3 hours. They didn't commit any crimes. They just wanted to have that experience to know what it was like for the people they were trying to help, and of course to really see what data is generated through that process and what data could be brought to bear to making better decisions in the future. I should add that these are not typical experiences of Code for America Fellows. We don't send them all to jail. But they do have this wide-ranging kinds of experiences throughout the year that mean that every fellow who's gone through the program has said that he or she had his or her life changed by it, that they would absolutely do it again if they could go back in time. So it's a really fantastic experience. I think it's fitting that we're talking about this here, because Code for America was inspired by this guy, who I think is in the room, who started telling hackers and entrepreneurs, it's really important that you work on stuff that matters. I don't know who Alex Gravely is or why he tweeted this, but he said, "Who if not we? When if not now?" And what I hope it means is that each of you thinks about the fact that I truly believe government can work for the people, by the people, in the 21st century, but it's only going to do that if we make it so. And so I hope that each of you here today finds their own way to make that so. Thanks very much.